Welcome to this new workshop session on Sandstorm with our lovely guests from Ethereum Worlds, Luko86 and Dadcipher. Ethereum Worlds is one of our newest virtual world partners, and the way we do this to onboard on those different worlds is we do a full educational session that lasts typically around 1 hour, where you can learn what the project is about, what their intentions are, what their roadmap are, and additionally how to build and get started in this specific world. And that's everything we'll cover today. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation, Dadcipher and Lucas. How are you doing today?
Doing good, and thank you so much for, reaching out and getting ourselves partnered up with you folks.
Thanks very much, Oscom. No, I'm great. Looking forward to get crack on with the session.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, I mean, if you want, you can do a quick introduction. I think I could introduce Ethereum Worlds, but I think you will do a better job than me at this. So, if you want to explain Ethereum Worlds in a few sentences, how would you explain it to somebody who doesn't know?
You know what? Ethereum Worlds has been definitely an evolving project. For all those that don't or have never heard of us, completely understandable. We started back in September of 2021. And during that initial craze, at that point, loot style projects were actually the big thing. I don't know if people remember that or if you were in the NFT world at that point, but loot style projects were like Dungeons and Dragons meets the blockchain, right? So you got text on a JPEG and then you dreamt it up however you wanted. And Ethereum Towers at that point was a free to mint project. There was no set direction on how we wanted to head. However, the project itself actually blew up very quickly. We went from like 50 people in Discord to like 500 seemingly overnight. And within the community itself, we noticed a lot of people, stepping up, asking questions. We had like an architectural student that was interested in helping conceptualize what Ethereum Towers could look like. We had somebody that owned massive pieces of land in Decentraland as well as Sandbox. So we quickly shifted it into so much more, and we started by hiring on a game development company to help us essentially break down and figure out exactly what we were looking for. So at that point, after one conversation, they're like, yeah, the poly count that you guys are looking for, the height restrictions and all these different metaverses are never going to work for you folks. So at that point, they made the suggestion that we move to building our very own metaverse. And that's where Greg, aka Luko86, comes in. So we brought in Greg. He is a world-renowned Unity developer. He's written several books on Unity development, as well as, teaches a few courses at local universities on Unity development to help us build Ethereum Towers, sort of the infrastructure and the behind-the-scenes stuff. On top of that as well, we actually hired some architects out of Scotland. They've won several Scottish awards for their architectural work. And help us build what Ethereum Towers is today. So as you can see, when you look at the, picture, the website along the AMA stage chat area, this is sort of the idea that they came up with. And kind of the cool thing is it's got sort of that helix shape to it. Effectively what it is it's designed to actually look like a DNA strand. So the community is woven directly into the towers itself. We did, though, immediately identify, 4,388 apartments, is only so big. So at that point, we started to decide, how do we do sort of next steps from here? And that's when we came up with the idea of the Ethereum Worlds, where Ethereum Towers will be the Genesis sort of location, I guess is the best way of putting it. The Genesis destination with several other outer worlds sort of in the roadmap for coming years. So people will be able to travel from their apartments to sort of these outer worlds so that they can get a completely different, environment to enjoy. So imagine like a snow-capped village or a resort island, or one big one that I want to do is like an outer space one where it's like colonies on Mars sort of idea. And that brings us to today.
How was it like to build the infrastructure from all those worlds? Because I suppose your thing is also to create a model where you can create those vertical worlds with ETH towers, but you can then also expand this infrastructure to build anything you want, really. So when did you do this decision?
Yeah, so obviously, right now, our core idea, the core thing that we're focusing all of our energy on is getting out sort of a MVP. The MVP is going to be Ethereum Towers. Then from there, we'll start to build out sort of the additional outer worlds. And obviously, one of the main reasons why we went with Unity development was because it's extremely scalable. So that is what we're currently developing in under the, I guess, helpful guidance of Greg and his team. On top of that as well, we within sort of our worlds itself, the one thing that we did help identify, or one of the major opportunities that we saw, is that all of these current metaverses were really focused on, I guess, like gaming in itself, whereas our community is filled with people. Probably the average age within our community is probably like 39, maybe 40 years old. Everybody has a couple kids. They're not really actually looking to get in there, grind for 12 hours a day to earn $7 in tokens. So they're really looking for a place to
Shots fired.
socialize. Well, I'm not here to I guess rain on anybody's parade, but at the end of the day, the biggest thing that we want to stress is like a new place where you don't necessarily need to be a game designer, that you don't need to take several hours of courses to understand how to build within Ethereum Towers. Obviously, this masterclass is completely different because you're building assets for the world, but I'm talking in-game to develop your own experience, your very own apartments into what you want it to be. People are able to pick it up in like 10 minutes, and Greg can kind of get into maybe a little bit of the tech side, but we're building it in VR. In fact, Greg is an Oculus approved vendor for Meta, so thank goodness.
Nice.
And you'll be able to experience Ethereum Towers, as you can see actually from Slater 8's video, kind of like what it looks and feels like. You are transported. It's a truly immersive world. When you get in there, it feels like people are standing, 10 feet from you, even though they are thousands, if not tens of thousands of miles away from you. So it's fantastic. That's sort of a quick little recap history of it. Greg, if you want to go into, I guess, some of the technical side of things, by all means, I'll let you jump right in here. I feel like I've been talking for about 10 minutes now.
Thanks very much. So you covered it pretty much spot on what we're building in terms of the whole idea for a project. So with this huge idea of building Ethereum Worlds, and comes quite a lot of technical challenges. So this masterclass, I would try to cover a lot of those technical details that those assets will need to meet to be suitable, because of course we can't just throw any 3D mesh into the world with, I don't know, 20 million polygons and expect it for Oculus to be able to render that together with 100 people around you doing different things. So we have a quite specific generic requirements for the 3D models in general for the entire project, as well as we have a set of quite specific requirements for the actual asset. So as you see the stream in the background where the different furniture items are placed, they need to be prepared a certain way for the system to actually accept them. And that covers quite a lot of different requirements, from scaling to poly count to naming conventions.
Okay. Yeah, I think other than that, I think we can get started into technicals if you want. Ahead of this, if anyone has any questions on the more philosophical side of the project, you can ask your questions now. We can read them later, or make a little pause in the technical things if it's too intense. But yeah, let's get into it. So, how to build in ETH Worlds first, maybe the basics.
Okay, let's go. So the first part of this, I would like to cover those generic 3D model requirements. Most of them are obvious, but it's quite important to go through them anyway to make sure everyone's on the same page, because we are aiming to standardize all of the 3D assets as much as possible. However, it's pretty much impossible task when you have a team of people working on building various assets for the system that it doesn't matter how well you document it, you will always have some sort of differences between the items. So first of all, poly count. The first question every 3D artist asks, if you want the model, what's the poly count do you want it to be? We actually have not have the hard limit for polys, or let's call them a trees count, because in a gaming world it's called trees, triangles really. Mm-hmm. So we don't really have any hard trees count per item. However, we want to be as low as possible, and this is a kind of a challenge that every single, again, not what we're doing, but every single a game art 3D artist has, how to make the model look as best as possible without breaking the budget of the poly count that we can render. So we are aiming to towards the lower poly styling of the items. However, we still the art direction of the entire project is to be as realistic as possible. So just to give you an example, low poly art styles has been quite popular recently, but we're not doing kind of a low poly kind of gaming art style. We're going for a realistic but low poly meshes. And wherever we, of course, need this extra detail, we're using different technologies like bump maps, but normal maps to increase the visual fidelity of the model without breaking the polygon budget on the item. So again, no hard limit here, as low as possible within the reason. What is important to cover here about, also is to make sure that whatever we need to add the extra geometry is added there. So if you imagine, I don't know, a large curved sofa, for example, when this is a large curved object. So if you go too low poly, you will just basically see a massive segments of the straight polygons, which you don't want to you want to avoid. But if you build a set like, I don't know, a cup, for example, that a set of cups that will sit on a counter, those curved elements of the cap or of the glass doesn't really matter as much. So the smaller detail can be there, but needs to be low poly. The bigger curved elements will really need to be subdivided to the point where they look like curved elements, but they don't break the bank. Anything.
Yeah, this is, I think, for context, the biggest challenge here. What Lucas was mentioning before with low poly, if you do too low poly, it really looks cartoonish. I mean, if you just look at, for instance, Decentraland is a really good example of low poly conditions. You would have a really cartoonish style in your world, right? In this model where you're trying to go realistic, you have a lot of constraints, and then it's the problem where the more detail you want to add, poly counts go really, really fast, really, really high, right? So you just got to find the right balance, and I think this is the complexity that builders will face in this specific world. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. And it's important, even if we're working on, let's say, on a couple iteration per object, per asset that we're building, it's always better to start with a lower poly and add the subdivision when we need it than the other way around. And this, I'm just speaking from my experience as a 3D artist back in the game. Back in the days, I've been senior 3D artist for one of the studios in London, and we have it's always easier to add more geometry than remove, because that screw up the UV mapping later on, and there is more work to be done if you're going other way around. Okay, so I don't want to get stuck too much on poly count, because it's only one of many things I want to talk about. I'm already way over it. Okay, let's talk about scaling in units. I've seen a tendency with a lot of the 3D artists kind of just get into the whatever 3D environment or 3D software they're using, if it's a 3ds Max, Maya, Blender, whatever. They just like to work on visually instead of start thinking about how big this thing should be in that world. So with Ethereum Worlds, we have a base standard unit, which is 1 meter. So 1 meter, let's say it this way: 1 unit in your 3D software, whatever software that is, it's 1 meter. So if you imagine you are building, let's say, a kitchen counter that's supposed to be 60 centimeters wide, so that it will be 0.6 wide in the software when you build it. And that, of course, during the conversion to the FBX files, we'll talk about this later, you will definitely need to make sure that you not convert those into some other units. For example, 3ds Max really likes to work in inches by default for some reason, and when you export to FBX, it sometimes goes to millimeters, and you have this 2.54 scale that is odd in the FBX that basically makes everyone scratch their head. Why is it too big? Why is it too small? So ideally, we drop it in. We use Unity as the engine that's powering Ethereum Worlds. When we drop the FBX into the project, it's the right scale. We don't have to even think about why is it slightly too small, or why is it 1,000 times too big and stuff. So we like to stick to the unit, 1 meter. It's 1 unit. Simple. Everything fits the same model. It's the easiest way to work with if you start with the right unit. However, if someone starts building the unit based on kind of like imaginary unit, then this is the problem. Another thing to cover about the scaling is and the different 3D software packages do this slightly different way, but every single object can have their own scale. What Unity called transform, 3ds Max call it transform internally. I'm sure this is called transform in Blender as well. Every single mesh that we build should have 100% scale. There is no artificial scaling for, I just want to make this a bit smaller, so I'm going to scale it to 78%, and they export it like that. This scale, unfortunately, will be also exported to Unity, and with the Unity internal batching system that optimized for the real-time rendering, it screw up the batching system completely. So it basically does not allow the meshes to be combined automatically into one in Unity, which means a lower performance on the slower devices. And because of the small detail like that, we're losing it. We are working on a set of tools that will allow us very quickly test those items. So literally be a drag and drop, and you get a red or green tick boxes, what works, what doesn't. But we haven't got this completed yet. So we need kind of everyone to stick to 100% scale, 1 unit, 1 meter. Done. Third thing, any questions to that point, by the way, because I know I talk quite a lot. Okay, I can see there are some questions already dropping in. If we are using...
There were some, yeah, exactly. There were some questions in regards to which tools you can use to build in there. I think here, just to clarify, we're talking about how to optimize the assets so that they can import it in their tool, right? So, Lucas, if you want to talk more about this and clarify the differences between your internal tool and the external tools.
So, in terms of 3D modeling package used to generate the assets, it doesn't really matter from our side. As long as it can be converted to the standard FBX file that we can import it into Unity, then this is all good. In terms of what works with our internal tools, I will cover this in probably 10-15 minutes. We'll go slightly into the detail of what asset hierarchy look like and what needs to be there or what cannot be there within the file, basically. I hope that helps. So Blender, 3ds Max, Maya, whatever other 3D packages are used, that's fine, as long as it can be exported to FBX.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Red asked HDRP or URP, and I think Dadcipher answered with URP. So I assume.
yes, we are using universal rendering pipeline with Unity. However, this doesn't really matter for the 3D modeling person who's working on the asset. Don't really need to know this because we handle importing those assets internally. So deliverable for each asset is the FBX file, pretty much plus texture file.
Okay, and you worry about integrating it.
Yeah. And because there is so much more going on behind the scene in terms of optimizing, reusing materials between the assets and stuff like that. So I don't know, when we have 20 different leather chairs done by 20 different people, we don't have 20 leather textures within the system. We only have one that has got unified UV mesh, UV mapping that works for everything. So, okay.
I think I saw another question in regards to if the market is open or not. We can talk about this later. I think this is also the question that relates to how to sell assets, how to make money as a creator in this system. So I think we can talk about this at the end. For now, I think current tip that we can take from scaling is 1 unit equals 1 meter, and we universalize those units across all different systems. So if you build for ETH Worlds, you need to make sure you're respecting the scale.
Yeah, thank you. Right.
Okay, cool.
Let's crack on with the next generic requirements, and that's not just for the assets, that's for everything. And I cannot stress this enough. Naming conventions. We actually do not have a naming strict naming conventions as long as everything within the models are named. So box 01, it's not what we want to see. We don't want to see unnamed materials or anything. Everything that is being added to a FBX file needs to make sense. So example, you building a chair, you're calling it a chair. If that chair has the material, plastic material, let's say on the legs, you just call it a leg material and stuff like that. So we just basically want to completely avoid the default naming because they just create confusion. And when you have thousands of assets and then everything mixed. So name everything, keep it tidy, make it self-explanatory, and make it make sense. And everything else is easier from that point. Another generic requirement. This requirement, it's not relevant to the assets themselves, but we quite possibly will need more help with the other modeling at some point. So I want to mention it. So there is an option called Preserve Instances with 3ds Max. And what that thing does is, if you are using multiple instances of the same mesh within the model you're exporting this mesh unbaked state. So let's imagine, I don't know, a chest of drawers with 3 door handles and 3 drawers. The door handle is quite heavy object. It's got some detail. We don't want FBX file to contain this door handle 3 times. We want it to contain it only once with 3 different positions. So preserving instances during the FBX export does that. Every FBX exporter actually does have this option. So if someone doesn't know what that means, I highly recommend researching it because it saves tons of space and it's way more performant. There was a question about the UV channel for baking light. So at the moment, our assets do not get baked because obviously, as you see in the middle, in the background with this looping video, all of those objects are movable, and Unity only allow baking light on the static object. So, however, we like to have UV channel 2 ready for light mapping if we need to. So all of the models that we build should be unwrapped in a channel 2 as well, ready for light mapping. which means all of the standard practices used for preparing for unwrapping the mesh and preparing for the live baking apply here. So make sure there is no tiling in the UV channel 2, and mesh is nice and flat, and seams are hidden from the view, or just try to hide them as much as possible if it's possible. So that's in terms of the light. In terms of the lighting. Okay, next thing, we are getting close to the end of the generic requirements. Let me just read this through. Sorry, I just got lost in my notes for a second. Okay, textures. Let's talk about textures and the sizes of the textures. So, ideally, we would like to use PNGs for all of the textures used within the models. The primary reason is we don't want to compress anything at this stage. We run uncompressed PNG, and we will handle compression automatically when we build, when we build on the Unity side. So all of the textures should be PNG. If the texture requires transparency, and I know that might be a bit confusing at this point, because 3D packages does it slightly different than Unity. But if there is a transparent like alpha channel within the PNG, it should be there, because we can use it internally in Unity. So PNGs, nothing fancy, just a normal PNG. We don't have to go into sort of raw format or anything with the higher color depth, but we can just stay with the, I believe it's called 8-bit PNG, and then with the transparency. What's important, however, in terms of the textures is the sizes. So we only like to stick to a power of 2 textures. What it means is, if you go power of 2 and multiply 2 for 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024, and so on, up to the maximum size of 4098 by 4098 pixels. Why is this important? We need to stick to the sizes for power of 2 for a compression reason. When Unity like to optimize textures for real-time rendering, power of 2 textures can be compressed very efficiently. If it's 1 pixel bigger, 1 pixel smaller, it will not happen. The algorithm for compression would basically not kick in as it should be. So ideally, we keep the textures square within the power of 2 sizes. If they need to tile, ideally we like them to tile seamlessly. So if we reuse that material later, or that texture later on some other material, if we tile it a few times, you will not see the seams. It's quite important. So try to think slightly ahead of just your model, because that texture or that material might be reused on something else, and you might see it on many objects later on. Yeah, maximum allowed size is 4K, so 4096 by 4096 pixels. Nothing bigger than that. We really don't need bigger than that. If there is a case, let's say, when there is some text on the mesh, right? So we had this case, and that needs to be corrected. We have recently added to a system like a London phone, like a phone booth. No, not sure if you've seen like a red phone booths, like a street phone, where they used to be quite common in London.
The London phone booths. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So and it had some wording. I think it was just saying telephone on the top, and the texture was prepared the way, or the artist unwrapped it the way that the word telephone was really low resolution, because he ran out of this 4K by 4K space. So in this case, we just need to prioritize space for the wording, because that needs to be clear, and lower the resolution in the unwrap on the other part of the mesh. I'm just checking for the next question that anyone?
Yeah, there is a question on what you think about the SketchUp builder. I think it's a
Yes.
simplified way to build assets.
I personally don't have experience with the recent SketchUp. I can. It was not my preferred tool about 15 years ago, or is it 15? But about 12 years ago, I've used it when I was doing architectural visuals, and exporting from SketchUp clean FBXs was impossible then. Not sure if that changed, but quite possibly that is a different story. I mean, I can tell now. It's probably worth testing. Prepare something in SketchUp, export it into FBX, and literally drag and drop to Unity. Unity is free, guys. So if you never had the opportunity to check, download it and have a look. It's literally just drag and drop.
Really
have
good.
A look if it works.
That's a really good advice too. I think to just learn to use Unity and test assets for yourself. I think especially if you want to work with clients that need those optimized files, you can really see what it means. When your file is not optimized and how then it interacts with the game engine. I think it's always a nice experiment to do. So yeah, definitely a super nice tip here.
Okay, that's great.
So yeah, to answer your question, Crawler, sorry, just to conclude, I think you would need to test with SketchUp to export the FBX file and see, first of all, if it's possible, and second of all, if it's well optimized or if it fits to the things that Lucas mentioned before. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that concludes the first part, which is those generic requirements for any models that we can have in Ethereum World. As this project, at least at the beginning, is for creating what we call internally items. What item really is in Ethereum Towers is the asset, is it like a furniture asset, let's say table, a chair, rug, or a picture on the wall, whatever you see in the background. And I'm really glad we have this looping because that really explains what we're actually doing here. So items, think about the items as assets or like a furniture items. I will use the word items because it's pretty much everywhere in our documentation, even though it's super generic, but it does work. So items are the furniture. Items are not like the what you see right happening in the background. Items are not wall coverings or floor coverings. That's something else. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to share my screen because I have a couple images to show.
I think you can share your screen. You can click on the bottom part of you should have an option in Discord. Share screen,
that's me.
and you can select. Yep. And yeah,
Right.
I would like to stress here just to explain how the builder your builder app will work. Because I don't think you went over it. It's basically a no-code tool that allows you, in my understanding, to drag and drop, move around different objects. And what you see, so for instance, the lamp you saw in the loops or the chairs or something, this is something that has been built externally, that is imported in the tool. And then with the tool, you can basically move those objects any way you want or lay them out, rotate, things like this. So this is the clarification.
Yeah, what you see actually now, it's the build itself. So what would the apartment owner see when he's customizing his apartment? So in terms of the tools we'll provide for this job, we actually, apart from documentation, we haven't got the full set of tools yet for you guys to test the models. But as long as they follow the requirements that we give, and those are written as well, so we not just rely on this session, then they will fit quite well into the system. As we progress through the project, because the project's been around for quite some time now, but we keep making more and more tools that streamline the entire pipeline as much as possible. So there will be some helpful tools that we'll be sharing as we go. And also, if anybody has some ideas during the work, what would actually help them, let us know. We have a tons of programmers that can jump on that and write the software that we need basically to make it better. So, right, I'm gonna share my screen now. No problem. So let's move on to items requirements for. So what I mean by this is what we need the FBX to contain, at what format for this to work. And if it doesn't work, it will really not work at all in terms of user won't be able to place it or rotate it or place items on the top of items and stuff like that. So there will be a few more images coming up after this one, but let's just start with the most obvious thing, which is the visible mesh. So as we said before, visible mesh needs to be as low poly as possible, and all small details should really not be there. It's just the easiest way to say it. If there is a small detail on the let's say furniture item that you want to really preserve, let's say it's like an old walnut desk with like a nice beautiful details on the corner, use normal maps. Don't use geometry, use normal maps, bake it nicely into the texture, and it will still look the same pretty much in the world, and not use the requirements. So the second thing is what you see, these green lines is a wireframe of the collider mesh, which is additional mesh on the top of our visible mesh. So we have two mesh types, visible, what users see, and collider is what physics engines see when we work with the item. The main reason of having this super simplified version of that visible mesh for collisions is basically a performance. So you imagine if you use mesh colliders, physics engine really have to calculate every single triangle, every single position to know where the collisions occur. If I don't know, if one table is not intersecting with another table. So this is what we use the collider mesh for. In terms of the naming of the collider, the collider, we will cover the naming later, but I just want to tell you how we actually detect on the Ethereum World side which mesh should be a collider. It just have a suffix underscore COL, capital COL, which basically is it tells the system, okay, this is a collider. We're not going to render this. This is there just for the physics engine. Is anyone have any questions on? I know there are questions about Unity versions, but this question is for now is not relevant. So whatever Unity versions you want to use for testing, that's fine. It doesn't really affect what we're doing here and now. So okay, again, visible mesh as well as a collider mesh needs to be present in every single item. They only need to be, and this I can't stress this enough, there only needs to be one visible mesh per item. So in case you have an item with multiple materials, let's go back to the leather chair where you've got leather backing and the plastic legs, you will normally just use the different material IDs on that mesh and apply it to these different materials to that mesh. So when we export this to Unity, we have a mesh, we have a list of used materials, and we can also swap those materials. So if we want to make a version, 5 versions of this leather chair with different leather colors and different finishes on the legs, with using an only single mesh, we can produce many assets from that. Okay, so that's in terms of the collisions and in terms of the collision mesh. I'm sending another image right now. 1 second, almost there.
If anyone has questions on collisions and meshes, feel free to ask. I know it's a more technical topic. I think some of you might be lost here. But yeah, let us know if you need help. And even if you need a small, like more general explanation, quick rundown, you can ask. Now, let's go ahead for the second one.
Okay, right. We're going even more technical now, but it will all make sense in the end of this. I promise you that, because we are just if thinking slightly above that just the visual mesh, what users see there is that we also use 3D geometry for a functionality within those items. So the second part of the functionality we have within the items, we have what we call surfaces. The surface, which is that super low poly blue polygons that you see on the top of that table, defines the surface where other items can be placed also. So you imagine if you have, let's say, a cup or a glass, a set of different glasses, and you want to place them on the table, that mesh defines the area where those other items can be placed on the top one. Does that make sense? Because it might be a bit confusing. And then this also needs to be a super low poly. Users do not really see this mesh much, apart from when he's placing the objects, and we basically highlight every single object and every single surface blue that the object is holding can be placed.
So what that does basically, to give more images, what that does is if you remember the visuals that Slatered was sharing before, when you can select an item and choose where to place it, it would allow to be able to place the item on top of the table, right? So basically, if you're pointing towards the table, then if this is placed, if this blue thing is placed on the asset, then you would be able to drag and drop the item on top of the table, correct?
Exactly. Yes. That's and this is also very low poly. It doesn't really need to be fancy. It just needs to define where it is. What's important about this, every single surface and this is up to you guys to define if that surface is something placeable or not. We just need to use common sense. If it's the table, you obviously know that table are the furniture items where you can place things on the top. But for the things like, let's say, small chairs, there will be a chair being placed in a second on that video. So you see that that chair does not have the blue on the top. That means that nothing can be placed on that chair. So all of the tables, all of the big furniture items like shelves and stuff, that should have this additional surface on the top, where we'll basically allow users to just place things on the top of each other. And it's quite a nice system, because if you place an item on the top of the item and you move the table, that moves everything together with the stuff that is on the table. So it's kind of like a real life. You put something in your desk, you move your desk, it moves with it. It sounds really simple. It wasn't simple to develop to get that working well, right? One thing, one technical detail, and that's in the pilot pack we shared with you with all of this documentation. So I'm basically going through it now. Is that every single surface should have only one single material assigned called surface, capital S, and that's it. That's enough for our system to know, okay, this material is the surface that it's going to be linking the physics engine to allow to put stuff on the top of that.
I don't know if an avatar can sit in your system, but
they can't sit yet. It has been there. We have this idea of avatars being sitting on the different furnitures like sofas and stuff. For now, however, we have quite a long roadmap that more the features that we really need before sitting avatars. So not really. We will have it. I suspect we'll have more. What's in a pipeline, and that's not being publicly said yet, is we're going to have a functional items. Let's say you have a jukebox in your apartment, and you can actually trigger music, turn on the music, or you have a TV, you can start streaming stuff, or you have like a HomePod, you can play the music in your apartment and stuff like that. You are on mute, Oscom.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. It's what they call smart assets in other worlds, such as Decentraland, for instance. I think some more.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, something like that. We even gonna go as far as like a home automation stuff. So maybe even like a voice triggered lights and stuff like that. So there's a ton of things we can do, like in real life. Okay, let's move to naming conventions, because that's quite important for our system to know how to find the appropriate parts of the FBX. So the main visible geometry of the item can be freely named without any non-constraints. So whatever, name your visible mesh whatever you want, make sure it makes sense. Don't name it box 01 like 3ds Max name every standard item. Just name it what it is. It honestly is important for our developers to know what they're working with later on, and they don't have to look at the item without knowing it. So the name should be self-explanatory. The second requirement for naming, the colliders must contain the suffix underscore col, for example, table underscore col. So that means, if you remember this green collider on that table, the object within the 3D package, that you should have the underscore col in the end. That means our system during the import knows, okay, this is a collider. I'm just going to hide it, use it for the physics engine. There's no need for rendering it. Similarly with the surface names, so those blue surfaces must contain the suffix ASUR or ASUF. It doesn't matter which one you use. This was an early mistake in our documentation that we just carry on for now, because there's a big change for us to go backwards, so it doesn't really matter. So you can pick this or that for every surface that we use. Materials are to be properly named according to what they are. Names like material 001 are not permitted. So yeah, please, I cannot stress enough how important this really is. Please name the materials what they mean for the mesh, not what they really are. So, for example, if you imagine office chair again, have a leather back and the plastic legs, you would not call it a leather and plastic. You will call it a back and legs. So the materials must be named according to what they mean for the mesh, not what they mean for the visual part of the material. The reason why is because we will change those materials anyway. We'll just need to know which channel corresponds to which part of the mesh really that really is the most important part. Okay, the next one, textures to be properly named, containing suffixes, so any additional texture like normal maps. So if you put underscore normal on NRM and the end of the normal map, that really helps us to know this is a normal map. So please keep it tidy and name everything as well as you can. Again, there is nothing in terms of naming. There's no strict requirements apart from those suffixes. Those are really important. If we miss that, then it will not work. Anything else, it's just convenience for the technical staff on our end to make sure that this can be recognized quite easy. Okay. Next image. I'm just thinking if I need it. We have a few more things to cover. I'm going to try to speed up now so this doesn't take an entire day.
Sure. Any questions in regards to naming conventions? I think it should be pretty clear. I think anyone who worked on a bigger scale project understands the importance of naming conventions. And here it's even more important because I suppose the suffixes are read by systems and code. So that's why detection is super important. So yeah.
Thank you. I think you another image. Okay. Is it possible to zoom out a tiny bit so you can see that? Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Pivot point position. So what you see, that little gizmo in the middle, it's very. I'm pretty sure you guys know what it is. Every single package, 3D package has this. The position of the pivot point of the model. So I'm talking about the higher level, the highest level item in a hierarchy in that FBX needs to be a position where the object needs to be at the base of the object where it would be touching another object. So example here, table touches the floor. It's in the middle of the bottom plate of the floor. So if we place this pivot point anywhere in the floor, it will look right. If there's anything else, let's say, I don't know, like some sort of a granite statue of like a Greek god or whatever, it would be on the bottom as well. There is a difference. There is an exception for the stuff that are hangable on the walls. Let's say like images and stuff. We require it to be at the back of the yeah, it's still in the middle, but it still needs to be where it touches the other surface. So it will be like a middle back of this. We at the moment we're changing the orientations for the wall hang objects anyway, so the orientation really doesn't really matter that much. But one thing about the orientation, and when you see at this this gizmo in this image, colors might be a bit confusing, and the access names might be a bit confusing because Unity and 3ds Max, for example, using different coordinate system. But in this one, X is red, Z is blue, and Y is green. What's important about the orientation is for to make sure that the object basically is placed the way that the blue axis, which is the Z-axis or 3ds Max Y-axis, face away from the user where he placed it. So it's kind of, we're trying to orient those objects as well as possible for the item to be usable straight away. So if you see this item is it's not a table, it's like a small minimalistic desk. And you can see it's got a plate between two back legs. And if you imagine, if you place this object in the front of you, you want this orientation to be similar to what we see now, not the other way around, because you would see back of that item first. And that's why this is important to orient the object with the away axis, or let's call it away axis, away from the object. I know it's quite hard to explain because we all work in different coordinate systems, but it might take few trial and errors to get that right for the package, for your package. So one more requirement to cover, and this is really important. Whatever we don't need to be in the FBX. FBX exporters in most of the packages put quite a lot of junk into the file. So if you go, for example, 3ds Max, you export a simple cube and you export it with a light, and who export it with the camera as well. So you just export the image and tick every single box from the FBX exporter that we don't need. If object is not animated, obviously don't export animations. If there's no lights in there, don't export lights. I mean, there is no case there will be a light anyway. So try to remove all of the other items that are hidden, even empty objects. We don't really need it. If it's not visible mesh, not collision mesh, or surface mesh, it don't need to be there. So that would conclude really, and actually we are spot on times. I think the most important thing is Oscom is to go through the Q&A now and make sure we can cover all of the questions, because it's quite a lot to digest here.
Yeah, I think we went through a lot of different things. I'm sure that people will need to do some tests, and obviously, once we get started with proposals and we get some different individual artists that are here on the call, or even some that couldn't make it and that will watch the replay later, I think we'll need some back and forth on the specifics. But more so, currently, I know some of you are really eager to start working in Ethereum Worlds. I recognize some names here that I think would be highly capable in that world. If you have any questions, it's the moment to ask. You have Lucas, you can even come on stage if you want to ask a question. You can just raise your hand if you want to talk directly. And also you have the chat box. If everything is clear, you can also say that it was clear, that you understood what's going on, and let us know. These are, I think we'll have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then we'll see. Erica is asking, what is the kind of file that you need to export?
It's FBX.
File format.
It's FBX. That is just probably the most well known in sort of a game artist industry right now. So most of the 3D packages should not have a problem with exporting to FBX.
Crawler asking, will the assets have animations or will they all be static? Lucas.
At this point, we will work only with static objects. Animated objects are on our radar, and we want to put them into our actual production pipeline at some point. However, the requirements for animated objects are not written yet, so we really need to be quite technically specific of what we need. So for now, those items will be static. Most of them will be just like furniture items or things that you could have in the house, basically. And some other cool stuff as well. We have lots of collectible items, like really cool, very nicely textured stuff.
Okay, well, I think you did an amazing job explaining. Seems like people have understood what we said. Maybe maybe in the project themselves it will be a bit different, but who knows? Maybe everything will be perfect. Where to see the bank of available items already? This question by Yolantis.
With the items that we already developed and inside the project is going into the open beta stage at some point this year. So that's when you can see them and actually get into the world and play yourself with them. This will not be in the next weeks, but it's happening this year, definitely, where everyone's going to have access to the whole product.
Cool. And will this be integrated in the Meta Store? Do you have insights on this already, or is it purely a VR application?
This is the plan. Yeah, we're definitely going to the store. It's the easiest way to actually get into the Ethereum world. We also planning a web the versions of it, so it will run in the web browser, like for example Decentraland. However, we're going to release VR first, and then we basically porting it to the WebGL platform to allowing even more people to do it. The main rationale behind it is that VR is the most immersive experience you can have. There is a big difference between, let's say, like a first person shooter kind of experience actually being in the game, right? So it really does. As soon as you try it first time, you meet your friends within the Ethereum world, you understand like VR is the platform to do it. Plus the web, it will be cross-platform web as well. So you can in the browser you can meet the people in VR. In VR, you can see the people in the browser, which is quite nice.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds super cool that you will be in the. I mean, that you will use the store approach and then you will go and have your own little website. I'm really looking forward to what you bring with this. At least it looks really smooth to use. I'm sure you did an amazing job there on that front.
Thank you. What you're seeing is actually quite an old demo. That we are so much further ahead right now, and today we have another internal release that everyone's excited about. That contains probably about 300 items that are within the system already.
Nice. Yeah, feel free to, if you want to, anytime you have something to share publicly, we can, reshare it in our respective channel that will be made for you, where people can chat about your world, etc. And I think this closes the session, educational session. Thank you everybody who was here today. It was a little bit of a smaller session, but I think you had a lot of very technical people in this chat who are listening. So that will be awesome. The replay will be available very soon. I think either end of, we're Friday. Okay, next week it will be available. And yeah, this closes this workshop session with Lucas from Ethereum Worlds. Thank you so much, Lucas, for your time. want to
No,
share?
I'm just very excited to work with you guys, and looking forward to see the first models being produced and added to the system. So it's all going to be super exciting going forward to see more and more items being added into the Ethereum world. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Oscom.
Thank you so much.